The Chilliwack River Watershed, a place of great beauty, of abundant salmon, in green places with some hidden secrets. The watershed is shared between Canada and the USA. Within the USA portions of the watershed are true wilderness places protected within the Mount Baker Wilderness and National Forest and the North Cascades National Park. Note, the Canada Star is where we sit this evening, but I will start our salmon journey guided by the American Star at the watershed's headwaters. Coho salmon exist in every part of the Chilliwack River watershed that is accessible to salmon. Now they are viewed as a habitat generalist. As long as they can get into the habitat, they will use it if it's not too warm or too low in oxygen. Now because young coho salmon must live 1, sometimes 2 years in freshwater before heading to the ocean, they are masters in moving from habitat to habitat to find the safest and most productive places to live depending on the season. Far upstream from Chilliwack Lake, the upper Chilliwack River is a typical high mountain stream, cold, fast, with not too much food for young coho fry. But coho do live here, at least for part of the year. All natural streams move across their floodplains over time, and sometimes leave old channels called off-channel habitats that can be very attractive for coho salmon to spawn in and for their little fry to rear in. This old side channel of the upper Chilliwack River is now fed from springs along the mountain slopes that adults coho salmon seek out to make their redds in the fall. When the coho fry come out of the redds in the spring, they find a quiet, productive refuge to grow in. But what makes it interesting, science has shown that not all the coho fry that come into these little ponds, 22 kilometers upstream from Chilliwack Lake, for instance, will stay in these areas for their whole period in fresh water. Some will move downstream, appear to be looking or seeking more productive and warmer habitats where they can thrive and grow. Now closer down to Chilliwack Lake, the river flattens out and the gravels are just a little bit smaller, and the old growth conifer forest holds together the riverbanks even during the worst winter floods. These are the stable parts of the river that salmon seek out for spawning. In my travels across BC salmon streams, from the Nass River in the north, through Haida Gwaii, and many places to the south, I cannot think of a more beautiful place to watch spawning salmon, embraced by an ancient forest on a warm summer day than the upper Chilliwack River. This portion of the watershed held its secrets very closely up until very recently. For decades, the fishery agencies did not know the runs of sockeye salmon were so abundant. It took an old forest wandering soul passing over the line in the mountains to discover a true wonder deep in the forest. Because I found this run of salmon so interesting, I wrote a story about the discovery of these long forgotten sockeye salmon. The House of the Salmon People. As we pass down through beautiful Chilliwack Lake, the salmon story continues, but with new leading actors, Pink and chum salmon. Before we leave Chilliwack Lake, I want everyone to know about another great place to share life with salmon and another rare and beautiful fish, the steelhead trout. On an early May day, if you walk the Trans-Canada Trail from the park, go to the footbridge across the river and look downstream and down. Deep in the pools lies steelhead waiting to spawn. If you walk back to the park side and find the Water's Edge trail leading upstream, if you are lucky, these beautiful sea-growing rainbow trout will be building their egg nests to pass the next generation forward. Count yourself lucky. It is truly a small calling of people that have seen wild steelhead trout spawning in nature. And this is the place, the best place I know of in BC to watch them. Enjoy. The good people of the Chilliwack River watershed continue to work together to carry on the restoration of salmon habitat, including for this iconic fish, steelhead. And even Canada's king has taken notice. Mysteries truly can live hidden away in the forests and streams of this wild watershed, as we learnt with the sockeye salmon of the upper Chilliwack River. These are two very rare and unique populations of salmon, which makes them very special and worth conserving for future generations. Do they still exist? No one knows for sure, at least for the riverine sockeye of the Vedder River back channels. The picture of the spotted Scots-Cattell Chinook on the right was the last known picture of this rare fish circa 1990s. But as mysteries often do, they appear when you least expect them. The spotted Chinook tail is from a salmon that returned in 2024. The Scots-Cattell Chinook, at least, still exists. If you are interested in hearing more about the Scots-Cattell Chinook and or the life of coho, these stories can be found here. During my career as a salmon restoration biologist, I had the pleasure of working with the many people that cared for salmon and wanted to help them survive in our changing world. Hopefully, by remembering past efforts, we can learn what worked and what did not, so we can do better for salmon into the future and give them half a chance to thrive in coming years. This is a place you could walk the Trans-Canada Trail with salmon and just become one with the beauty of this place we all call home and share with these wonderful species. 1.5 kilometer long Centennial Side Channel, constructed in 1996. It followed the path of what was then known as the Centennial Trail, a trail constructed in 1967, celebrating our country's anniversary. It was later included in the Trans-Canada Trail. But this is a beautiful place to see salmon and to understand that these areas, which I call salmon refugia sites, were often located along the edges of the floodplain, away from the worst effects of the winter floods. And they're often located in old channel features, like we saw in the upper Chilliwack River, old channels that have been abandoned long ago by the river, but we reactivated to create these refugial sites. And they can be used by all species of salmon found in the river. And they're a lovely place just to get close to these species. Enjoy the walk. As we move down the river past the junction of Slesse Creek, the river becomes a tougher neighborhood for salmon. Now this is partly due to these old glacial lake bottom sediments, called locally the clay slides. More sediment means poor egg survival in the salmon redds, but also a more unstable riverbed that can quickly change after each winter flood. And there is no doubt the lower Chilliwack River and its alias, the Veda River, are known for their winter floods. This was a video recorded near Peach Road on the Chilliwack River and was shot by another salmon lover known as Rod, who just could not restrain himself to see what his salmon friends were enduring in November 2021. Now he survived to tell the trail and did not end up a part of the large organic debris pile just downstream. So thinking about November 2021, this is why coho salmon juveniles are adapted to seek out winter refuges like this to help them survive the winter floods that always come. Our job is to make sure there are as many of these refuge habitats along the Chilliwack River as practical to help wild coho salmon thrive into our coming wet and windy future. These other species looking for stable spawning refuges also benefit when coho juvenile refuge habitat projects are created. Just some clean gravel and a stable water supply, and these areas will vibrate with spawning salmon of many species on a cold, wet winter's day. Salmon habitat restoration is an experiment with a hope of helping salmon. So when a project is completed, it is very worthwhile to ask the question, did it do what was hoped, help salmon? This sounds easy, but it's not. Salmon assessment programs are complicated and difficult to assess properly. And I wanted to highlight some of those practical people that worked out these challenges in the Chilliwack River watershed. The big aluminum structure on the right is called an in-river screw trap, and it is designed to catch migrating salmon smolts moving down the Chilliwack River. It was installed at the Chilliwack Salmon Hatchery River intake site and run by hatchery staff for this 1990s coho habitat restoration assessment program. Now the trap had to work in all river flows over a 24-hour time period and must be pulled into the bank when high flows occurred. It was hard, difficult work, and if not done properly, then salmon smolts captured could be killed, which these guys made sure did not happen. I also wanted to give a shout out to the many volunteers that help our salmon every day. Even up in the remote bushlands above the Chilliwack hatchery, Pete and Ron said this guy showed up every morning to help out. Not much of a talker, just a few grunts, but as they say, the world is run by those that show up. And this fella showed up to help salmon. The salmon habitat restoration world along the west coast of North America sat up and noticed what salmon researchers had documented about the impact of the work had on coho salmon of the Chilliwack River watershed. Small changes in critical habitats had much larger impacts on the production of coho salmon smolts in the spring. This study stands out in the literature because it looked at the entire coho smolt production from a large watershed area, not just individual projects. The good people at the Fraser Valley Watersheds Coalition continue to fight for salmon and their habitats along Peach Creek. Just last year, they developed, with their other partners, a complex wetland pond that coho juveniles and many other wildlife will enjoy over coming decades. These kind people they have acknowledged a now gone salmon advocate that fought his whole life to protect salmon in his home watershed, Don Buxton. One day, a mysterious resident of the Chilliwack River watershed, who likes to hide in steep little mountain streams away from pesky fish, came down from the mountain and checked out something new at the bottom of their little stream. Some two-legged lizard things had built a large pond full of brush, logs, and bugs that warmed up each day in the afternoon. Having grown really too large for their little stream, the biggest brutes of this mountain tribe occupied and took ownership of these new restoration ponds. Any coho juvenile that dared to get too close to these new residents took one look at their large gaping mouth and swam quickly away. When the giants come to your patch of heaven, it is best to wave and leave them alone to grow and get bigger. The only place in Canada these giants live. Be careful out there. Who could have imagined a military-industrial site could be turned into such a place of peace, reflection, and sharing experiences with wildlife? Small groups of good-hearted people working together can truly change the world. Right behind us here tonight is one of the most easily public accessible places just to watch salmon pair up, fight for their spawning area, dig their redd, lay their eggs, and bury those eggs in gravel if one has the patience just to watch. Can't be better than that. The plan for 2025 is to embark on a freshening up of this well-loved habitat and develop plans for coming years to do the same throughout the GBHNR for the benefit of salmon, other fish, and other wildlife, even those spindly-legged teenagers that stumble out of their stick nests each summer looking for an easy meal. Nature's way, some would say. The rarest fish in the Chilliwack River watershed is this sharp-looking guy, the Salish sucker. This genius is also known as Catastomus to his friends. One day, perhaps not too far in the future, a new habitat restoration project will be planned for him and his coho buddy Brian, and even some cousins with an odd name that does not seem to get much respect. Stickleback. More to come next year.